Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to podcastjuice.net. My name is Michael Dean. You're listening to the podcast on Prince. And joining me today, we got a special guest here, Mr. Hucky Austin. Hucky, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm blessed, man. I can't complain, and if I did, it wouldn't matter no way. So keep it pushing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. For those who don't know, Hucky is there's a term that you use, executive protection.
Yeah, it's a fancy term, or the term that we use in our industry for bodyguard. So
bodyguards.
It's executive protection or close protection.
Okay. Some way I would say back in my neighborhood, we say muscle in the window. That's my mans and them who got my back there. You know, that nigga over there, you don't want messing. So we always appreciate that aspect of the culture. You know, that whole, I'm sure bodyguards definitely date back to different things, but you know, I always looked at bodyguards was, like I said, that was your people's, like, yo, there's somebody here that got your back, that's looking out for you. And I can only imagine what that was like, you know, you working with Prince. And I'm talking about the years, like, you know, I would say the golden era of Prince, you know, where a lot of us came up on Prince. You were with Prince like in the 80s, right?
Yeah, I started actually in, I want to say, man, the spring of 1983, and I stayed until 1991.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I had a nice little run there for a minute.
Yes, sir. Well, man, let's just dial it back, man, because there's some things I've heard, and I know some things some fans heard, but let's see if we can get some real understanding and get your story. Like, so where are you from, actually? Like, are you from Minneapolis or are you from somewhere else?
Well, I am pretty much a Minneapolisan. I was originally born, though, in Kansas City, Missouri. And so my mother was a single mother, and she had two children at the time, I being one of them, and she wanted something different for her kids. And so she moved us up to Minneapolis, and we stayed with my grandfather. But I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and we came up in the late 60s. Okay. So, but I've been in Minneapolis long enough, Michael, that this is definitely my home. And yeah.
So did you went to school and all that in Minneapolis?
Yep. I went to school here and went to college here and continue to make this my home even to this day. Now, some would say you were totally crazy because I just looked at the weather last week and it was 20 below without any wind chill. And to those individuals, I would say, yeah, I think I am a little nuts. But yeah, I still make Minneapolis my home. That's
what's up. Now, going to school and coming up in that environment, you said so you would have been like in the late 60s, 70s?
Oh, a little bit more. I'm not that old. I was a baby, man, when my mom was like 60. I was like, man, Michael trying to date me big time, man.
Trying to give you OG status. It's all right.
Yeah, a real OG, right?
Triple.
This is the wrong show. You got to get Alan and Craig on for them numbers, man. No, man, I graduated from high school in 1981. Now, there's probably some people in your audience that will say, well, man, you still all graduated in 81.
So 81. Okay, so you was like for me, you would have been the older cats that came through. Okay, so coming through that, I'm curious, and we'll get into how you started working with Prince, but I'm just curious, had already heard of Prince at this time? Because he was just kind of coming out.
Yeah, man, I remember, Michael, I was in 9th grade, and this girl was playing his For You album. I was like, who is that? Who's that girl singing?
Hilarious.
And she said, it's a boy, and his name is Prince, and he is awesome. And so I'm like, okay, so I think that was like 79. So I was aware of who he was, but, you know, it really wasn't my style of music, man. I was into like Earth, Wind and Fire, Cameo, Confunction and Slave. So that was my groove. Okay. That's who I listened to. I didn't really start appreciating Prince's music till a little bit later on. Now, I knew who he was, and I thought his stuff was okay, but it just wasn't my groove.
Interesting. Okay, so, and also at this time or during these times, did you already know Brown Mark?
Oh yeah. Me and Mark have been partners since like elementary school, man. So
Okay.
I first met Mark when I was in 4th grade. So he's been my boy for a while.
So y'all also like kind of like day one homies, like
Yeah,
they've been
for
around. Okay.
sure.
Okay. And I remember now reading his book, and he does mention you a lot in the book. It sounded like y'all had some adventures back then, to say the
Man,
least.
I told him, and I said, "Don't put everything out there. You got to come back with a book number 2 now." And but yeah, man, we had some great times, man. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. But that was one of the most amazing things to have the privilege of working with P, was to be able to travel and do all these cool things. And so I got some wonderful memories.
When you so in that early time, did you have any thoughts at that early time that you'd be the bodyguard or doing any of that type of work, security?
No, man, and it's funny you should say that. So Mark had already got hired by Prince, and so he would occasionally bring me out to rehearsals. And at the time, Prince had a bodyguard that everybody knows, Charles Big Chick Huntsberry. And so Chick and I got to be really good friends, man. And he says to me one day, he says, well, why don't you consider doing this line of work? And I told him, Mike, I said, man, because I was in college. I was a freshman in college, and I was playing football. I said, man, I'm going to be a professional football player. That's my calling. That's what I wanted to do. So this cat looks at me and says, you're never going to be a professional football player. I say, why is that? He said, because you're too slow. I was like, what? I said, how do you know that by just looking at me, man, that I'm too slow? And he's like, I tell you what, he said, you give it some thought, think about it. And if you want to do this, because they were getting ready to go on the 1999 tour. So one of the things that I've always wanted to do that's been intriguing to me is travel. And so I was like, that would be kind of cool. And he even started having me doubt myself. I was like, well, maybe I am too slow. But man, I didn't know anything about executive protection. I didn't know anything about the industry. And certainly even now from where I'm at today, when I think about when I first got into the industry, and what I've learned is very different. But yeah, to answer your question, no, I had no intention of even doing personal security.
So that's interesting because, and shout out to Big Chick. So you met him and he's telling you, yeah, your dream for the football, maybe that ain't it. Like, was he saying, was he trying to suggest maybe you should get into security, or was he just saying?
Yeah, he was, he's definitely doing. And like I said, Michael, we had built a relationship, and we can talk more about this, but in my industry, it really starts with networking and building relationships. And at that time, I had no idea, but that's exactly what I was doing. I had built a relationship with somebody. I had built a relationship with a decision maker. And so there's a couple characteristics about our industry that's really important, and loyalty and integrity are some of the big ones. And so Chick had seen that early on in me. And he seen that was somebody that, he would want to work with. He's seen also too, Michael, the ability to groom somebody and to mold them into what he thought would be a good protection specialist. Because I was a newbie, man. I had no idea, about what this industry was about.
This sounds almost like the whole concept of a mentorship, right? Like somebody taking you under your wing. Okay. Wow. See, and we'll get into that as that sort of plays out later. But I think that's something of a theme that I notice through a lot of Prince stuff, that level of mentorship, somebody showing you, hey, this is how you do it. Let me show you how to, get better at it. So that's interesting to see that from you at that early point with Big Chick. Cause I haven't heard that before. I just saw him as, this is big buff white dude that was carrying Prince around, I just looking from the outside. So that's very interesting. Had you went to any of the shows, concerts prior to you working?
No, man. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to say I wasn't a Prince fan, because that wouldn't be accurate. I just had other music that I preferred at the time. And certainly early on for me, getting to know his music, I didn't see and understand the genius. But what I remember early on, Michael, like my boy Mark, he would come back from rehearsals. He's like, I just don't understand how he hears that and how he sees these things. And, and so if you're not really a musician, which I'm not, I had a conversation this morning with somebody is that I love music, certainly, but music don't love me back. And so, because somebody asked me, they said, hey, man, did you, being around Mark and all these other cats, did you ever give any thought to playing an instrument? And I started laughing. I said, yeah, I gave some thought, but I quickly figured and found out that was not my niche. But yeah, man, so early on, I didn't really appreciate him. But man, as soon as I started going to those rehearsals, that was a game changer, man. Really? I mean, that was a game changer. And I tell people, Michael, I was like, what the fans and what a lot of people seen him perform, and certainly, man, it's magical. It don't hold a candle to what we used to see in the rehearsals, man.
Wow.
There's where you got an opportunity to see the real genius. I mean, man, my job was to protect this cat. And I found myself often mesmerized in sound check. It was the most amazing thing.
See, we've had, a lot of us fans have had the opportunity to hear some of these rehearsals just in bootlegs and things of that nature. I can only imagine what it's like to probably be there and to see that. And this is leading me to some of the questions I had, jumping a little bit ahead here. In terms of the rehearsal stuff, it sounds like Prince, we hear, is very much meticulous about achieving a certain sound or playing things a certain way, or just really driving home, getting the songs right and playing them properly. But it also sounds like too that once he's really getting in, it sounds like he would be joking a lot sometimes, or at least he would say things, and it seemed like he would be addressing people that were standing around or something. Was he ever would just start going in on people clowning or?
Oh, man.
You could hear that.
And you've heard this. I mean, he had an amazing sense of humor.
Right.
And he was the biggest joker. And so because rehearsals were so intense, I think that he understood the need to bring humor in. And I got a couple stories that will, you'll probably find pretty interesting. But one of the things then this was the 80s. You remember there was a couple wrestlers called the Road Warriors. And so those are some more of my mentors. And so I kind of emulated them and how I dressed and and a lot of things that I did. At that time, I was a gym fanatic. I stayed in the gym. But our attire consists of blue jeans. I mean, when we weren't on the road, because Prince wouldn't have that. But when we were at rehearsal, we wore blue jeans and flannel shirts. I mean, that was what I wore every day, Michael. So we were at rehearsal one day, and me and one of my boys, we got our flannel shirts on. And Sheila's like, we should play a joke on him. And this was during the Sign of the Times rehearsals. And was like, well, what should we do? And so they all knew we wore these flannel shirts. And she was like, everybody buy a flannel shirt and wear a flannel shirt tomorrow for rehearsal. So the whole band, man, everybody, Levi, Bonnie, everybody, Sheila, all the techs, managers, everybody, we all have flannel shirts on. So Pete comes in the rehearsal, man, and they're playing 1999, man. And, we're grooving. And, he's so focused, man. He's laser focused on the music. And we probably jammed about 30 minutes. Michael, then he stops and he looks at me. He looks at my guy, and then he starts looking around, and he just falls out laughing. He said, oh, my God, no, y'all didn't. He said, here you are playing one of the funkiest grooves of all time, looking about like a bunch of country hicks. And so that was one thing that he did. And another thing is I used to wear these bandanas all the time. And I don't know if it was one of the events you were at, but I shared this with a group of people. And so I had my bandana on one day, and I came into rehearsal, and P looks at me, and they're playing, and he stops. He said, hold up, just stop. And I knew I was in trouble when he looking at me, and he tells everybody to stop. He said, Hucky, you know who you look like? And I'm like, nah, man, who do I look like? He said, man, you look like Harriet Tubman. And man, everybody fell out laughing, and they're having a good laugh at, I'm the blunt of the joke. So I obviously didn't find it all that funny. So I okay, man. Cool.
You got in your feelings?
Yeah, he hurt my feelings, man. He really did. And this is one of the things that I tell people. I don't think he ever said that he was sorry to me or anyone else, but he certainly did things to let you know, man, I messed up, my bad. And so the very next day after they laughed, and I'm the ridicule here, I come in rehearsal the next day, Michael, and Prince got a bandana on. They were shooting the Get Off video.
Oh,
and
wow.
And I looked at him and I said, wait. Yesterday you said I look like Harriet Tubman. He said, you do look like Harriet Tubman, but I make it look sexy. And man, everybody died. But that was his way of saying, hey, Huck, I'm sorry, that was messed up laughing at you like that. So I'm going to take it and put it back on me. And that's
Wow.
what he did.
I know the look you're talking about with the bandana tied up.
Yeah, yeah.
Hilarious.
I own that, man. Shoot, I'm creative. I was the one that came up with the bandana, right?
He said you look like Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, he did.
That's Prince. Prince is hilarious. So, so he would go, that makes me think of that part in Purple Rain where it's like, how's the family? And everybody laugh. And you see Morris kind of like, that might have been a little too much.
Yeah, right. A little bit over there.
So Prince would go, he'd crack jokes on people like, he'd get on.
Man, you don't understand. This dude, man, he had an incredible sense of humor. He really did. Prince was this funny, man. He was a funny dude, man.
Wow. What, so just to go back, you were friends with Brown Mark, being mentored with Big Chick.
Right.
What's the transition to being a guy that's, hanging out, chilling, to, okay, now you're going to be an employee here and you're going to be in charge? How did that work?
That's an interesting question, man, and it's a good one. In the beginning, I didn't do security. I'm like, well, what happened? I thought I was going to be a bodyguard. So in the very beginning of working with Prince, I was an errand boy. I did everything, Michael. I cut Prince's grass. I took his cars to the car wash. I did all little tasks that I didn't even understand. Why am I doing this? And now as I'm older, I understand that Chick was checking my work ethic. And there's some early on tests that happened to me early on, because one of the reasons that I got hired, I believe, was just because I'm a guy of integrity. And so that's important. And it's really important to anybody that's in my industry. I mean, shortly after he died, I got a lot of calls about asking me about my time with him. And I didn't want to share some of the things. And there's some things that I feel comfortable with sharing today because I think it's important for people to really know who he was. But there's certainly some things that, will go to me to my grave. But in the beginning, man, no, I didn't do security. I was pretty much an errand guy. And I didn't get my first assignment until this happened. So Prince had this white T-Bird that he had got from his dad. I think it was in the Alphabet Street video.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, one of the things, I'd get up, I'd go over and do all these errands for him. I'd clean his car, take it to the car wash. And Michael, man, every time I would take his cars to the car wash, there would always be a large sum of money in these weird places. I'm talking like $2,500, $3,000. Like under the seat, man, in the glove box, under the armrest. I'm like, this is strange. This is weird that I'm always finding money in this car. And so every time, I would clean the car out, and there was two things. It would be his tapes and the money. And I would put it in an area, right? Like he had this little, underneath his armrest, this little compartment kit, and I'd put it there. And then I'd go back and tell him, I said, hey, man, there was some money that you probably didn't know, was underneath underneath your seat or your armrest. And I'm really naive. I didn't figure out till later on what he was doing. And he would look at me, he gave me that grin. He's like, so all the money's there? I'm like, yeah, all the money's there. Why wouldn't it be? And he'd go back and he'd check it. And it's like, yep, it's all there. And then, Michael, shortly after this happened a couple times, I found myself on an airplane for the first time on an assignment going out to LA with Prince. Now, what I didn't know that I found out later on is that Chick was a family man, and he had his kids, and he had been doing this for a long time. And Chick was well into his late 40s, and he needed somebody to help, lighten that load for him. But the challenge with that is, and not only with just P, this is with any celebrity, they're very choosy on who they allow to come into their inner circle. And so they were seeing if Hucky was the right guy. And so, that's how I transitioned. And next thing after that point, we went to LA, and it was disastrous, but, it was my first time out there. But Prince was kind. He worked with me, man. He helped me, man, because I was this country boy that had just fill out the turnip truck, and I'm going to LA for the first time, and the big city, but that's how that happened, man. It started from me just being an errand guy to getting my first opportunity. Now, once I found out that this was real, I'm like, wow, I'm protecting the biggest cat in the country right now. I wanted to understand and know more about the industry. I'm a big proponent in training. one of my mottos is learning never exhausts the mind. And so I'm always constantly feeding myself, on this information. And so I was like, I want to know what this bodyguard and stuff's all about. And there wasn't very many schools at the time. I mean, if you were a bodyguard and you were serious, you were in the Secret Service or, former law enforcement officer or military, but not very much stuff on civilians. And so I found this book, and I can't remember the name. I think it's called Dead Men Don't Pay Their Clients. It's by, I think, dude named Jack Thompson. Somebody's going to call me out on that, but I'll remember it, as we're moving forward. So I started reading about what I was doing, and I was like, wow, this is kind of serious business. And so that's how I transitioned to wanting to get more and more information about this line of work that I had chosen to do.
So, so I love that the test was, right, put that money there. Here's these tapes. Let's see what Hucky's going to do. And you passed that test. And then you said the first thing was you guys went to L.A.
Right.
What if you can remember what year this was? And the other part I was going to ask you said it didn't go very well. I was curious if you could go into that. But I was wondering, did you realize just how popular Prince was on that first album?
It was starting to happen now. Okay. And so how the whole LA trip went is like after I passed all these tests, I was at Mark's house. And man, you remember them old wall phones, man? Mark's mom had this old wall phone in the kitchen. And so I was in Mark's den. And so it's important to tell you this, Mark's a practical joker too. I mean, I think just about everybody in the Prince camp, we were, I think that kept our sanity. So we're all terrible with jokes. And so I'm in Mark's mom, they had this den off their kitchen, and I'm in there watching TV, and Mark says, telephone. I'm like, okay. So the wall stationed, the phone's stationary on the wall. So he brings the cord. The cord probably was 30 feet long, but I don't think it was originally like this, Michael. I don't know if and maybe this is like, you were too young to remember this, but after you stretch these cords, the elasticity would never come back. So You'd have these really long cords. And so he drags it almost 30 feet into the next room. And he says, hello? And I'm like, yeah, hello. He said, Hucky, this is Prince. I want you to go to LA with me. And I'm like, yeah, man, right, whatever. And I hung up on him.
Damn.
And so Mark comes back in the room and says, did you just hang up? I said, yeah. I said, man, you need to quit with them jokes, dude. I said, who'd you get to do that? And he was rehearsing with Maserati, so I thought it was like Terry Casey or somebody. He said, Huck, that really was Prince. I'm like, man, that wasn't Prince. That was Terry. And he said, Hucky, that was Prince. And so he calls back, and Prince is like, this is really Prince. Don't hang up on me. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I said, Mark, I thought Mark was playing a joke on me. And so he said, you wanted me to go to LA. And so I think it was like 84 is what I want to believe. It was early 84.
So it's like Purple Rain.
Yeah, it was called, they had this, we just finished up the shooting for the movie. Wow. And so it was then. But here's what I wanted to say why it didn't go well. So the number one thing that anyone that does what I do is we do what's called advanced work. And advanced work is really just getting ahead, being proactive. So for instance, if I was going to take you, Michael, you were my client, I was going to take you to a restaurant, guess what I'm going to do before you go to dinner? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to check out the restaurant. I'm going to find a place that I know from experience where you would want to sit, but also to a place that if there was an emergency or a challenge that I could get you out of the restaurant pretty quick. And I'll share a story with you later on about a nightclub in Los Angeles where someone started shooting, and we were in the club with Eddie Murphy and MC Hammer. Yeah, and I'll tell you how that went. So write that down.
I'm writing that right now.
So that's the thing. Is advance. And basically advance just makes things easier for you as the protector, and it makes any uncomfortable situations that the client may face to be eliminated. And so my first time, I don't know about advance work. So things like, where's the limousine at? We just get off the plane. There's no limo here, or, we get to the hotel and all those things that Murphy's Law kicks in. We don't have a Mr. Nelson today. I know this is Prince, but, we don't have a room booked for you. Wow. So those type of challenges, those are the things that went wrong for a newbie that didn't know better. But it was a great learning experience because guess what? It didn't happen again. And the thing that was really cool with Prince is that he knew I was new, man. He was patient. I mean, I think about it, I'm like, man, this dude should have fired me day one. But I had something that, he seen in me. And that was the beauty about Prince, man. He could he could bring out the best in you, man. He could bring out stuff in you that you never even knew you were capable of doing, you know.
Wow. So you were saying, so I mean, did that happen? Like y'all got off the plane and like it's like, okay, where we go next? Was that
Yeah.
And are there people like that notice him at this point? Is he at the point where people
absolutely. He's rock star now, you know.
So what do you do? I'm curious how you handled that situation. Like, what did you do?
Would have done, but there's where he came in and helped me, man. He's like, call this person. Okay, so for instance, what happened is we got off the plane, and here's the thing, man. So like, I just finished up a book not too long ago called Remember the Time, and it's really a good book. It's about Michael Jackson.
I've read that, but I've seen the movie of that. Movie.
But this one's really cool because it's from security's perspective.
Yes.
And just the challenges of it. And here's the thing about artists like that, but they are so involved in their world that it's not that they're selfish or anything like that. They're focused on being creative people, and they're not aware or in tune with the actual problems that regular people deal with, you know? And so Prince is like, I get off an airplane, somebody's always there for me. It always goes smooth. Well, Hucky was supposed to set that up. And Chick, you know, I mean, Chick needed to be with his family, and those are things that he would have taken care of. And so one thing that didn't happen is I didn't get a good walkthrough, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And remember too, this is pre-cell phone. So, you know, today people are like, well, how come you didn't use your GPS and how come you didn't get on your phone? Well, my cell phone was a pay phone somewhere down the airport. So little hiccups like that. I didn't know how to advance a nightclub. There was a club that we used to go to called Carl's and Charlie's. I think that's it, on Sunset. Right off, I think, La Cienega and Sunset. But, you know, I didn't know anything about going to the club, meeting with the club manager and club security to get Prince in and out without there being a problem. And so there was a problem. We went to the club and the door was locked. We had made arrangements to come to the back door and it was locked. And there were photographers out there taking pictures, and he hated to have his picture taken. So those are the challenges that I had in the very beginning that, you know, those are lessons learned for me. And, you know, and fortunately for me, he was patient. And fortunately for me, I was a guy that only needed to be taught something one time, and it didn't happen again.
I hear that he wasn't the type of dude that had a lot of time for excuses.
No, never. But you know, he was reasonable. Prince really was. But he would let you know that, you know, we don't do excuses here. Either it happened or it didn't. And that's a lesson that I keep to this day. You know, nobody wants to hear excuses. We just don't. Right. We missed a plane one time. We were in London and we were coming back to Minneapolis, and you know, and from his mind, it was my fault that we missed a plane. For me, it was because he didn't get up when I told him to. But he explained to me, you know, that it's your job to make sure that I'm there. You know, whatever you need to do that. Because I was like, well, Prince, this how he said, I don't want to hear excuses. So, Prince, yeah, wow. Man.
So you bring up a lot of things that we don't even think about. Like you said, he didn't get up in time. How does that work? Because again, being in that position that you are, and you have this superstar talent or any sort of person like that, but do you have to like knock on that person's door, the hotel? I mean, how literal do you have to be to make sure that he's ready? Because you have to move at a certain time, or was he a spontaneous type, you know, spontaneity? Like, oh no, we're gonna move when I say. How does that?
That's a great question, man. And I don't know if you've heard of Clubhouse, but it's a new audio platform. Yeah, and so I'm on Clubhouse, and what I do on my show on Clubhouse, Michael, is I help people that want to become protectors. And so that's a question that comes across. What do you do when your P, and P in this situation stands for principal, doesn't cooperate with you? And the only thing you can do is what's worked for me and a lot of other protectors over the year. You have to make them aware of what the consequences will be if they don't do what you say. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do, because most times they sign the check. And so what I quickly learned to do with Prince is like I knock on the door, and if he didn't answer, then, you know, I'd call him. If he didn't answer the phone, I would knock on the door, go in his room and say, hey, it's Huck. We got 15, 30 minutes. We have to be out of here unless you want to do something different. And there's where I learned how to begin to work with Prince, and was successful. Prince, you could not tell him, Michael, what to do. If you did that, he was like, oh, oh, really? So I would always give him the option. I started phrasing my questions to him, with giving him the option to decide what he wanted to do. And I started saying, unless you want to do something different, or you see things a different way. So now I throw it back at him, bro. So like if we miss the plane now, it's because it was his choice.
See, that's a lot of game right there. How do you work with somebody who is, the boss? You don't tell them, but you present options in a way, then you put the onus on them and say, okay, it's your show.
It's the whole art of presenting stuff. And it's not just me. I got a buddy that worked with Usher for years, and we sit up and we tell war stories, and we're laughing because we're telling the same thing. I got buddies that work with Michael and Madonna, and and so when people are like that, man, you don't tell them what to do. Okay. They tell you, they tell the record company, they tell everybody else. So obviously, my number one, objective is the safety of that individual. And so I have to be able to get it across to them that these are some things that we need to do. But how do I do that? And that's the art of communication, man.
Okay. I love that, man. I love that. So during this time, and again, you can let me know what you can talk about or not, but I remember the We Are the World and that whole recording thing. And there was no internet back then, is you could only sort of rely on either word of mouth, which would be very sketchy, or what you did see in the media. But from my understanding, there was something that happened with Prince and some photographers. It was like a big thing at the time. And I was curious, were you around at this time?
Yeah, I was one of the bodyguards involved in the fiasco. Two of my buddies got arrested that night. And, because I foreseen what was going to happen, I didn't go to jail that night. And I'm thankful about that. But Michael, that's a wonderful case of how people didn't know how to communicate with P. People told him, whatever you do, and this is management, okay, his management, do not be out and about in town, do not be seen. Because basically, if you know the story, and I'll sum it up, Prince didn't participate in the recording. And it wasn't because, and this is my perspective from being there and having conversations with him, it wasn't because he was being a jerk or he thought he was better than the rest of the musicians or he didn't believe in the cause. He just didn't work well like that. That wasn't him, man. Mm-hmm. And all the times that I was with him, I never remember him being in an environment to where there wasn't one or two other people in the studio with him. That just wasn't his thing. So that was out of his comfort level. And so, that's what the thing was. He didn't want to be in a room with other musicians like that, and for whatever those reasons are, sure, he should have been able to make that decision. The problem is the optics, right? It's always the optics. I think about Ted Cruz now going to Cancun. I don't know if there's anything wrong with him going to Cancun, but how does that look when your whole state's messed up?
It's not a good look.
You know what I'm saying? It's always the optics. And the optics in this situation was with P going out, you can go out to the nightclub and your bodyguards can beat up people, but you can't be doing, other great musicians in this wonderful cause.
Wow. And was that, I don't know how much you can speak on that situation. I mean, was it just people was trying to get his picture all up in his face, or what? What happened?
That's what I mean. So here's the thing that I'll share with you. Prince did not want his picture taken. He just, and that was one of the toughest things that we had to do, is like, at all costs, do not allow somebody to get clean shots of him. He didn't want that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what his reason, and I never asked him, Michael, why won't you, what's the big deal? But he didn't want it. And so as his protectors, it was our job to make sure that didn't happen. And so guess what? There wasn't the internet or anything like that, but people knew that across town there was a group of people that was doing this, recording for this amazing cause. And here Prince is going into one of the local nightclubs. And so, it doesn't take long to know what somebody's routine is. And also, too, there's always individuals on staff at a nightclub that would, especially in LA, man, it was terrible, that would inform the paparazzi that, guess what? So-and-so just pulled up, him and his bodyguards, and so next thing you know, you come out and there's 30,000 photographers there. And so, and here's the thing with the paparazzi, man, they can be really, really aggressive. I mean, that's their whole game, Michael, is to get you to get a confrontation. It looks good for sure. Yeah. And so, man, I can't tell you, bro, how many times over the years where I had camera lenses up against my head busted open because, and at that point I'm like, are you kidding me? I wanted to not take some people out, but you can't do that, because then next thing you know, you're on, at that time it was the National Enquirer, but
Right.
today it would be TMZ.
TMZ front
It's
page.
bodyguards, beat, paparazzi for no reason. So
I want to jump to just something else real quick, because this is something I find interesting and I want to get your perspective. So that type of situation, particularly back then, you didn't hear a lot about that. I don't know if those things happened or not, but the other aspect of this, Prince is a black artist, and dealing with this. Now you jump a few years later, maybe a decade or so, when hip hop is at the forefront, and the stars of that genre are a little more closer to the streets and the neighborhoods and things of that. And I think there's a time where certain people, the bodyguards and the protection, changes from not necessarily the professional, but you getting your man or the buddies from the block coming to hold you down, and you starting to have these posses of people and your crew and stuff. Does that dynamic start to change from, the paparazzi being so aggressive, and now you have people that probably don't understand that kind of game and just see that as total disrespect? Was there ever a part in the executive protection field where it was like, man, we have to present ourselves this one way, but here's another segment of this kind of coming into this industry that's not dealing with being professional, like they really putting hands on people? Was that ever a thing?
That's a great question. And I'm going to go back to what I said to you earlier. Everything comes down to communication. So I like to believe that I've had a pretty successful career in dealing with the paparazzi and this, people at hotels and everything. And one of the things that I learned early on, Michael, is that you have to be respectful of people, and you have to treat people with some decency. And I found that if you did that, if you weren't the guy that was 6'5", 300 pounds saying, "Move, get out of the way or I'm going to hammer you," but if you say, "Hey, you know what? Can you help me? I really need your help. Can you help me do this?" And so one of the things that I did, bro, right off the bat, I learned after a couple confrontations, is like, "Hey guys, I know you have a job to do, and I'm going to do everything I can to allow you to get some shots." And that wasn't true, but they didn't need to know that. Mm-hmm. And I would communicate with them. And man, when I found that I communicated with people like that, and I was respectful, and I didn't tell people I was going to smash you if you didn't get out of the way, then all of a sudden, not only with the paparazzi, but just with people in general, we would go in nightclubs, and if I was by myself or it was one other guy, what am I going to do with a whole club full of people? I can't. So I have to get club security to help me. And so I would go out, I would meet with the club manager, I would meet with club security. And on top of that, I would tell them, "Man, thanks guys. I couldn't have done this without your help." And sometimes I tip them out, man. And so I was just respectful to people. Now, what you said earlier, I don't think it has anything to do with the genres. It just depends on the people that you're hiring, and that's with any industry. You can hire somebody that's a professional, or you can hire somebody that's not a professional. I don't think it's a tag or a stereotype with any industry, because I know a lot of individuals in the hip hop industry that have excellent protectors. Vice versa, I know people in corporate America that have some of the worst guys in the world running their security details.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, man. So to answer your question, I guess at the end of the day, it's how you treat people. And I have found in my career that being respectful and talking to people, man, and just explaining what you're trying to do, Right. It's like, look, my job is to get this guy from point A to point B. I know your job is to cover, this individual for, whatever media agency you're working for. How can we make that happen?
Okay. Oh, I like that. Speaking of something like that, I mean, I'm always curious how people responded to Prince when they saw him. Maybe he was walking through the airport or wherever it was. And you've heard Prince sort of tell little stories of, in his perspective, how he would see people reacting to him. But I'm curious from your vantage point, how did fans or people react when they saw him? At a certain point, I imagine he was so popular, people probably wanted to rush toward him, I'm assuming. And I'm curious how you guys dealt with that.
Well, this depends on the circumstances and the environment. So we went to see the Jacksons on the Victory Tour in Dallas, Texas, and I think it was '84, Michael.
Wow.
And there were 6 of us, and Prince wanted to go to the show. And it was I think at the time it was Texas Stadium where the Cowboys used to play, the place that had the hole in the roof. And so we did our advance work. We had spoken with the Texas Stadium security. We had meetings with Michael Jackson's people so that they knew that we were going to be in the house. And this kind of goes back to courtesy too. It's because we didn't have to tell them, but
right.
We want them to know that we're in the house.
Now, can I ask you a quick question before you go into this? Because are you talking about Prince wanted to be like, go there and not be behind the stage, but actually be out?
Right.
Okay. So Prince is funny for that, but go ahead.
This is in line with you wondering how people responded. So I'm going to share how this one went for us, and it wasn't very good.
I can imagine. I almost feel like he's trolling her a little bit to do that because he's got to know the attention is going to change.
Well, he was very devious at times. And at the end of the story, you'll see that. So we put him in a hoodie, and we said, whatever we do, we're going to space. And so the one thing that we knew, we couldn't have Chick around Prince because Chick had gotten so famous that if you seen Chick, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out somewhere Prince was. So we kind of had Chick back, and we had Chick on incognito as well too. So it was me, Gilbert Davison, and a couple other guys. We were pretty close, but not as tight. And we call it a walking formation, but not as tight as we normally would be because, we wanted to appear that whoever this individual was, they didn't have security. And we asked Prince to downplay what he wears. And he had a problem with that. But we said, do we want to go out there and cause a scene, or are you just trying to go enjoy the show? Right. And once again, Michael, that was me learning how to give Prince options, because if you want to cause a scene, then let's get 100 bodyguards and just go right out there. Now, I don't know how Michael and them are going to appreciate that, but we can do that. Right. And he's like, no, we don't. That would be disrespectful. We don't want anyone to know. Okay, cool. So, man, we get out there, man, without a hitch. It was beautiful. And I remember, man, it was one of them. I wish I had one of my sound buddies on, and maybe you don't understand a little bit about sound, but they had the soundboard in the middle of the field. Because like I said, this is Texas Stadium. It's a football field, a football stadium where the Cowboys played it. But they had one of these what is that called? But anyway, the soundboard was stacked up on top of the scalping. And so we got out there, and they had these little ladders that you go up, and we got Prince up to the soundboard. And so Prince was up in the soundboard with Michael Soundman and a couple other people. It was beautiful. We was there for about an hour, and he decided that he wanted to go. So he's got a hoodie on, man, and he looks down at me, gives me this devious look. I'm like, oh, come on, man, let's don't do this. Michael, he pulls the hood off.
Oh, Lord.
And this girl looked up, bro, and she said, it's Prince! And, man, not only does he take his hoodie off, he gets down on the field. And we told him, whatever you do, be cool, stay calm, don't run. Don't run. What does he do, man? This dude takes off like he's Carl Lewis, man. All right. A couple of us are young enough, we can hang with him. I was an ex-football player, so I'm in pretty good shape. And we're running through, man, and people are mobbing us, man, grabbing his clothes, tearing our hair. And here's Chick, a man well into his 40s, big guy, split his pants, out of breath, trying to run, man. And we were so mad at that cat, man, at the end. But that crowd, it went crazy. And, Michael knew they weren't happy because we were disruptive to their show. Right. But the fans, they lost their mind, because it was this rivalry that was brewing. So, so in that sense, the fans, they'd see Prince and they would go crazy. It was just like the Beatles. Now, in another segment of the population, that didn't mean anything. So one of the things that happened on the Purple Rain tour, we played Hartford, Connecticut. And, one of the biggest things that was really important with Prince was moving him through an airport without causing, without it being traumatic for him. And so I just asked, man, I've always been a creative guy. I said, hey, is there any way that we could get the limousines on the tarmac so that we don't have to go through the terminal? That just seems like that would be easier for everybody else. And it would be easier on your security staff, on your police department. And this was Hartford. And it was great. And so, man, it happened, Michael. And Prince turned around, man. I got him in the car. He gave me the biggest smile. I didn't see very many of these, bro, over the years, but he was happy. And he told Chick, he said, see, Hucky can get stuff done. This is how it should happen, every city. And Chick laughed, Chick looked at me like, give me the dirtiest look I ever, I'm like, well, why are you pissed off at me? And I quickly found out that Chick knew that this was impossible. Maybe we could do it in Hartford, Connecticut, but you're going to see, young man, you're a little too smart for your britches. So, Michael, the next city was Washington, D.C. And I think the airport now is Reagan International. I think at the time it was National.
Okay.
And I said, I went and had a meeting. I'm feeling pretty good about myself, man. I just accomplished something. My boss was pleased with me. So I had a meeting with one of the lieutenants. I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, who? I said, Prince, Purple Rain, man, right? And he looked at me and he put his arms across and says, let me tell you something, young man. He said, I don't care what prince he is and what king he is and from what country he's from. He said, we don't do that. As a matter of fact, the vice president of the United States wouldn't get that treatment. He said, there's only one VIP in this town. That was a Southern guy. And he said, he lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So no, I don't know about your prince and that's not happening. And so the reality check came and said, yeah, there was a segment of the population that was crazy about Prince, but there was also people that I don't know who Prince is and I don't care who Prince is.
Man, okay. That's funny, that Victory Tour story. I could see that being in a movie or something, and just something like that would play very differently today in the world of social media. Celebrities
everybody's asked me, why don't you write a book? And I've considered it. But the one thing that I don't want to do is when you get that close to someone, you're gonna know things about them that I don't think that people should know about. And so I thought about if I did do a book, it would be focused, Michael, on just the protection part, on what it was like to protect this individual. Now, I don't know if that's of interest to people, maybe it is, maybe, I'm okay with sharing stories about Michael Jackson, but there's certainly some intimate things about Prince that I just wouldn't want to share. And nor do I think it's right. And that's just my perspective.
We respect that. We respect that. Everybody has their different takes or different stances. And, I think the thing about Prince, for the most part, a lot of the people that work with him have this level of respect for him, which is why we never really got to hear a lot about him. Right. And so, but I love that people are sort of sharing a little bit now so we can at least, I think just historically and just to learn even more context to the great music, which I think probably speaks for him just as much as well too. Right.
Right.
Okay. So, and I love how, again, here's your mentor, Big Chick's like, oh, okay, you thought you did something now, so you're going to overpromise something. Writing checks you're behind going to be the cash. And,
right, there you go, man.
That's another lesson into itself. This is just to throw another question in here. Because of Prince is, who he was so popular. He was not only very popular with fans and stuff, but I assume even to celebrities would be a big deal to sort of meet Prince and thing. Were there ever opportunities when other celebrities, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, but other celebrities would come around, whether it was Paisley or different places. And I'm just curious if Prince was kind of like, hey, Hucky, man, maybe can you make sure that person kind of, stands back a little bit or so? I was just curious if even celebrities sometimes started to geek out to Prince.
Yeah, man, for sure. And the first time that I seen it firsthand was at the premiere of Purple Rain, the after party. And just to see Hollywood, and Michael, man, that was so amazing for me because it's like I was working with P, but now I'm starting, because we were pretty isolated. Once in a while we go to a club, or more than once in a while, but we go to a club and you'd see people. But now to see Hollywood looking at him just like a regular fan, that was crazy. And I remember, I think it was Heather Locklear. I'll say some things. I'm okay with that. But it was at the after party, and she really wanted to meet Prince. And then I can't remember the guy's real name, but there was a show called Hill Street Blues at the time, and there were two patrol officers. One was a black guy and one was a white guy. And I can't remember the white guy's name, but he was a big Prince fan, and he wanted to meet him. And then, of course, Eddie Murphy. I can tell you the basketball stories, but Eddie, man, was a true Prince fan. So yeah, so absolutely, there was a bunch of those.
Wow. Well, you mentioned Eddie Murphy, and of course, rest in peace, his brother Charlie Murphy. Some classic Prince basketball stories and all of that. Everyone knows these, but you also, I don't know if you are one of the people he mentions in these stories when he talks about these basketball games, but you played extensive basketball over the years, I'd imagine, with Prince. And I heard you tell a story. I want to jump on this one thing. You told a story about Prince found out that you guys would have these games. Was it, I don't know, once a week or something like that? And then, but he wanted to come to the game. And what I wanted to ask you about something like that is when, and you can say this about even if this was your boss at your job, your boss hears about you having these barbecues and he want to come. And, that changes dynamic because you be with your boys and you act a certain way. But here's like Prince, right? He's a celebrity. Did you have to get at your people, the other ball players, and be like, hey, man, Prince is coming through. Don't be like trying to G-check him or extensively. I mean, was there any conversation
Absolutely,
was there guys who would talk too much shit and I don't know if I want him to be here?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there was one guy, I'm not going to say his name.
Sure.
Because I don't want him to be pissed at me. I still talk to him this day. He's probably mad. I think he got mad at me for sharing the story. But anyway, man, there was one guy that I had to have that conversation with because he was he talked a lot of stuff and he was a big guy. Prince, everybody knows Prince is a small guy. And I was concerned about, our basketball games, there's some big dudes, we get physical. And I'm like, I don't want that happening with P. I had a fear that somebody giving him a bowl to the jaw, or, doing something crazy. I didn't want that to happen. So, I had to have that conversation. I laid out the rules. I was like, don't be. And thank goodness, Michael, this was well before social media. This is well before cell phones. So, I'm sure that it would have been disastrous if it would have been this time, but I had to lay out some rules, man. Be careful who you call. Not be careful. Don't be calling your girlfriends or anything like that. It's just going to be us. So I had to put out some rules, man.
Well, now when Prince came though to play, was he getting down?
Man, Prince was a hooper, man. Okay. And I don't need to tell that story because everybody knows, that knows anything about him. He could hoop, man. This is how much of a hooper he was. Prince was 5'1" or 5'2". If this cat would have been, I honestly believe, 6 feet, 6'1", another option would have been to play professional basketball. He was that good, man. He was really, really good.
Wow.
And I played around some good ballers, man, but this dude he had a jump shot, man, he was dead on, and he had handles. He could break you off, man. And that was the thing, like with the Eddie Murphy thing. Eddie couldn't, well, I will say that Eddie couldn't play no basketball, man. They were hacks, and so here you got a dude like Prince that can hoop. He's, and Prince had a lot of other guys like, the dancers, Damon, Tony Kirk. Damian was like an all-state basketball player at a powerhouse basketball school. And Dwayne, his brother, was an all-star. So we had some hoopers around, man.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of our things that we did, man, for relaxation. I think it was really good for P, his escape. We played hoop a lot.
Was he just as competitive playing basketball?
In everything. So one of the things, bro, at Paisley, when he was in the recording studio or wherever, we had done, once we had him in a secure environment, we still had to practice what we call situational awareness, but it wasn't like, when we were out on the road or something. And so we did things on our downtime. And so we were big, we really were big into John Madden football. And
about video games?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And before Madden, there was a game on Nintendo. I think it was called Tecmo Bowl.
Tecmo Bowl, yeah. All right. Here we go.
Yeah, Michael. So we played all day, man. That's what we did. While Prince was in the studio recording, we played that.
Hilarious.
Man, this cat came out one time. I don't know if you've ever been to Paisley, but in the atrium there, he had a little kitchen. We had a TV set up there, and he came in and he stood behind me, and me and Gilbert were playing, and he didn't say nothing. So I finally said, hey, you want to play? Nope. It's like, are you sure? Nope. So, okay. But he watched us play for about 45 minutes.
Huh.
So the next day, Michael, he comes back and says, let's play.
Really?
What? And, I'm good, man. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Man, this dude. So there was a play with Bo Jackson that you could do, and it was basically unstoppable. And so Prince figured that out, and this dude just was waxing everybody. So I forgot who he was dating at the time, and she said, "Hucky, I got to tell you something." And I was like, "What?" She said, "We went out and bought the game, and he stayed up all night long playing it." I said, "That sucker." But that's how competitive he was, man. Wow. Not only as a musician, this dude wanted to beat you in everything.
Dominate stuff. I love that, because you hear that other things, like I think when Jimmy Jam talked about, Prince stayed up all night and did 1999 and came back the next day and was just like, whoa. And this is that same sort of mentality, like, oh, this is what y'all doing? Okay. Y'all go home. Yeah, I'm gonna freak this. Let me master this, so when they come back, I'm about to eat these up. And then here he comes. Boom.
He went for the juggler, man. He was competitive. I mean, I remember one time we were at Sunset Sound and Michael Jackson came. Well, Michael Jackson was there. And they were playing ping pong, and Prince was really good at ping pong. I mean, he's a good pool player and good at ping pong and basketball. And Michael, man, Michael wasn't very coordinated. I'll say that. And so Prince was really good. He's like, "You want to play ping pong?" And he turned around and gave me that look. I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." And so Michael, they started playing, and Prince is just killing him. And Prince is like firing these serves at this dude that are coming at 100 miles an hour. Michael wasn't very coordinated, man. Lord. And so, and Prince is just like, boom, 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 boom. And Michael's like, "I don't want to play anymore. This isn't any fun." And so they went back in the studio, man, and Prince was busting out laughing. He said, "Man, that dude looked like Helen Keller out there playing." But I tore him up, man. But he was competitive, Prince, man, for sure.
Man, so was Michael doing something else there, or they just came there to link up real quick or something?
Yeah, Sunset Sound was a really big studio, man, that everybody would go to. Okay. And Michael was there. I mean, they had other studios, and if my memory serves me correctly, Michael was, he was recording something. I don't remember what it was, wow. And I can't even tell. I mean, I was in the studio so much that it's like the concerts. They all blend together, and it has to be something really unique to make me remember, because it was just so much of my time. That's what I did.
Man. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, and again, leave names out, but I'm just trying to understand it from just from the player logistical playbook that is the unwritten story of Prince, but it's sometimes the elephant in the room. Did you guys and what I mean by that is, did you have to help coordinate, like, who could come and see Prince at a certain time? And like, if you knew, and I think you spoke about being prepared, like, okay, if old girl come right now, old girl over here is in here right now. If she come, that could be a problem. How do I manage? Did you guys have to help manage that type of thing, or is that just something Prince handled in his own way?
Here's what I will say, without saying too much.
Sure.
During my time with P, he dated some people that were in his organization. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so with that being said, anybody that was in his organization, especially if they were on tour, they would see individuals that they would have issues with. And so it was our job to make sure that they were never seen. Okay, if you understand where I'm going.
No, I do. Yeah,
leave it at that.
Okay.
But yeah, we did coordinate that, and that was our job to make sure that so and so didn't see this.
Wow. Yeah, because I would read stuff. Go ahead.
I feel comfortable saying this. There was a certain person that he was dating that used to stay in the same hotel, was part of his entourage, that we had to move to another hotel.
Oh, that
was the solution.
Man, okay. Hey, and
it's rock and roll, man. Some of that stuff,
right? Yeah, I mean, but logistically, you gotta keep the main your what do you call him? Your principal.
Yeah,
has to be secure and drama free as much as possible. So that had to be a part of, like you said, moving the chess pieces around a little bit, right? But,
there you go. That's a great word. You moved them around.
Wow.
Coordinate, Michael.
There you go. Coordinate.
I'm a coordinator.
You kind of threw me off a little bit there. I'll say, so I want to jump to a particular period if I could. Were you also around, and did you go like overseas to Paris and France for like the Under the Cherry Moon filming and things
Yeah,
of
I
that nature?
live with him in Paris. When I tell people, so it's funny, man, because I don't always share with people who I've protected over the years and stuff like that. And so I will say, yeah, I lived in Paris. And when I'm having that conversation with some people, it's like, oh, you really? Or were you in the military? Nope. Or you did this? Nope. Where did you live at? I'll tell that. We lived at 60 Avenue Foch, which is right by the Arc of the Triumph. And so I was like, yeah, I lived in Paris. And so, yeah, I was there. I get in the morning and walk down the Champs-Élysées. I would run down to the Louvre, and that was my morning run, and I'd run back home. So I spent a lot of time with Prince. I lived at a lot of his estates. And so certainly at the apartment in Paris, it was myself, a lady by the name of Randy Laterman, who was one of his chefs. I think Gilbert was there on and off. And I think Robbie too, Robbie Pastor, who was Prince's personal assistant.
Shout out to Robbie. I met that.
Robbie's my guy, man.
Yeah,
that's somebody else you need to get on there.
Yeah,
I mean,
we've been
Robbie's cool,
over the
man,
years. I just need to get on it. But yeah, doesn't he? Did he have? If I'm this is the right person, does he have like some kind of driving service?
Yep. He's got
Yeah.
a driving service. So Robbie's good people. He's my guy.
Yes, sir. Salute to him. Well, I always wanted to ask, going over there, and you mentioned like traveling and stuff. How was that for you? Like, was that your first time going overseas at that time? Or I'm just curious, like, you coming from Kansas City, then Minneapolis, and you done some stuff in the States, but to go overseas, what was that like?
Yeah, I can answer that for you, but I'll just tell you that, so prior to getting with Prince, I hadn't did much traveling, but Michael, it was always a burning passion. I've always wanted to travel. Matter of fact, I remember when I was a young kid, my dad worked for the phone company, and I used to collect phone books. But I would collect phone books from different cities from across the United States because I was so fascinated. I was like, oh, Miami or Chicago. I want to go there one day. I want to do this. I want to do that. And, and I need to go back because people heard me say at the beginning, I said my mother was a single parent. And so the man that she married, I recognize as my real father because he took care of two kids that weren't his own and treated us and loved us as if we were. But anyway, because how we live, man. Yeah. People come back and say, well, didn't he say that his mom was a single mother? So we gotta establish that.
Yep.
But with that being said, so I always wanted to travel, man. And that was the thing when Chick initially gauged my interest in doing this, I thought about traveling. And so I am going to get right to, traveling to Europe. But I'll tell you, man, what hit me was the first time that I had to go to New York. And it was Prince, Mr. Nelson, and myself. And it was the first time. And Mr. Nelson hadn't been to New York either. And I remember Prince on the plane saying, he said, Hucky, have you been to New York? I said, no, this is my first time. And he's like, great, I'm going to be the one leading two newbies around the city, And so, man, it was just so, I remember when the plane came in and the pilot said, look out on your left side of the window, you can see Manhattan. And I remember Michael seeing the Statue of Liberty, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, man. This is awesome. And so that impact was the one that really got me. Now, when we went to Europe, because the first time I had been to Europe was on the parade tour. And so London was the first place that we had been to, and that was crazy. But then after a while, what I often tell people is that the cool thing about my job was I was able to see the cities. The messed up thing about my job is I wasn't able to see the cities.
It's kind of in and out.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but like the rest of people that I work with in the entourage, they would tell me, oh, I just went to the Eiffel Tower. And Mike, we had went to Paris 6 times before I had finally had an opportunity to see the Eiffel Tower. Because a couple things to remember, back in those days, there were no cell phones. And, I moved when Prince moved. And if he didn't have any interest in going to see the Eiffel Tower, then I didn't have any interest. And so one of the things that often makes me sad is that I was in these places, but the only thing I could tell you about during my time was, oh, that nightclub in Copenhagen, Denmark was off the chain. Oh, remember this nightclub in London on the West End? Off the chain. Oh, what about Big Ben? I haven't seen Big Ben.
So you guys, you're there for work, basically. Y'all was working.
Exactly, bro.
Wow.
So yeah, I was in Paris. We lived in Paris. The only reason why I actually got to go down to the Louvre and stuff was because it wasn't far from the house. So I would run for about an hour and then run back to the house.
So the part I was going, when you're going overseas, I was curious from your perspective again, during the protection, are the audiences different there in terms of in terms of how you have to do your job? Do they respond differently than American audiences or fans would?
That's kind of a two-part question. Okay, so from this perspective, yes, the audiences are very different. Prince, it seemed that the Europeans really, they just didn't listen and enjoy the music. They really got into it. They studied it and wanted to know everything and understand Prince as a musician. And so when you have that perspective and you're going to see the shows, it's different as opposed to, oh, Prince is the latest thing. He's cool. The Europeans, and this is no bash on the American artists. I don't want anyone to feel that, but that was different. And Prince even had mentioned it at times. From a protector's perspective, no, it's all the same. You have to understand that threats come from anywhere and at any time. So we can be in Bogota, Colombia, or we can be in Little Rock, Arkansas. As a protector, you're constantly preparing yourself for those threats. One of the mottos in our industry is 99% boredom, 1% sheer unmitigated terror. We are constantly preparing for that 1%. So with that in mind, no matter where you're at, a good protector is always going to do his due diligence. We're always going to do our advanced work. We're always going to analyze what the risk is. And sometimes, Michael, it's different, In some places, it's that we just got to be worried about over-aggressive fans. It got real to me our first time in Germany because it's like, man, I'm like, oh, man, this is great. I'm traveling the world. Man, let's go to the show. Law enforcement's coming in. What's going on? We got a bomb threat. Everybody has to evacuate. And Michael, it hit me. I'm like, wow. There's people who want to harm this dude. There's people that want to do evil things to us. There's people that want to blow up the show. And Michael, that was like a turning point for me. I had begun to start understanding what I was doing, but then I took it to a whole new level. I was like, man, I'm responsible, or I play a part in this man's safety. And so to answer your question, bro, from a good protector's perspective, it's all the same. Situational awareness is something that I have to practice on a daily level. And I'm married, man. It drives my wife crazy and my kids, because like I tell my kids, we know, Dad, if we go to a restaurant, make sure you know where the exit is, make sure you look at 2 or 3 exits, never sit with your back towards the door or window. And so I'm always constantly prepared for any situation. Tell my daughter, when you're driving, don't be on your phone. I mean, not because of the safety issues, but you never know when someone's going to roll up on your car and jack you,
Man, we're going to deviate from Prince for a second here, but with your perspective and, you being a father and you, the business and industry that you're in, I'm curious the conversations you probably have with your children and your son, like how to navigate out here and how to move. Not just because somebody might jack you, but how do you respond, right when you get pulled over or, you don't want to put yourself in these types of situations. Are you like really did you like really train your kids in these types of things?
Yeah, my kids and my wife and myself. And it all starts because people ask me, it's like, hey, what can I do? What can I do to protect myself? What can I do to protect my families? And I always tell people, Michael, it starts with one simple thing. It's called situational awareness. And Michael, that's really being in tune with our environment. Because Michael, there's so many indicators out there that things could be bad or they could work out badly for us, but we're just so oblivious to them that we don't pay attention to the signs. There's a guy by the name of Gavin DeBecker. He wrote a book called Just 60 Seconds. And he just talks about being in tune with natural cues. And like he did a case study of individuals that were attacked. And in almost 100% of them, we have this natural and born instinct that tells us when something's wrong or it's not right. But what happens, Michael, too often is we ignore it. I'll give you a great example. About 5 years ago, I had an uncle that lives in Houston, Texas, that was shot at a car wash. And thank goodness he's still alive to this day. But we talked about what happened. And he said, I'm so mad at myself. He says, because having conversations with you and other people the years, there were things that you told me that I didn't pay attention to. And so in his particular situation, it was around dusk, and there was a car that was in the back of this self-serving car wash, just sitting there with these two kids. Now, he's like, I didn't think anything of it. It had the lights off, and I was like, that's weird. That's awfully peculiar. And so he said, I just kept on doing my business. And he said, the next thing I know, I'm involved in a gang initiation thing. Young kid gets out, pop, 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 pop,
Jeez.
5 times. And like I said, thankfully he made it through. But the lessons that he learned was, he said, I knew it didn't feel right. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times with most of us, our bodies will tell us, we'll know when something don't feel right. Have you ever had that feeling that the hair on your back comes up, Michael? It's like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But how often do you brush that off? And so what protectors do, and all of us are protectors in some sense, whether you're a dad, whether you're a mom, whether you're an older brother, we're all protectors. Mm-hmm. And so it's beneficial for all of us to take and use these practices in life, and especially, Michael, considering the time that we're in right now.
Right.
There's some crazy folks out there, and there's some crazy things going on. And so the first thing that I would tell you or anyone in your audience, start with just being in tune with your environment. It will tell you a lot, man. It really will. It will help you get out of some bad situations. And then the next thing, you can talk about training and everything like that, but just being observant.
Mm-hmm. Man, now, one of the things, going to Brown Mark real quick, he talked about in his book, it shocked me, but then I realized, like, yeah, he lives in the real world. It seemed like Mark kept a thing on him. And, he was a gun owner, a license, I'm assuming, and all these good stuff. And without delving too much into it, was that something that as a protection has to be on the table? Well, it has to be on the table, but, maybe one of the tools that you had to use or at least have access to,
That's
protect
a great question, man. It's certainly a tool that we use in this industry. Now, here's what I share with people. It's a tool, and it can be an effective tool, but it's not the only one. And so here's the problem with guns. When we get to the point where I've used my firearm to protect my client or myself, Michael, guess what? I did something else wrong. I didn't see other signs, because remember, that should be a last resort. Because when you have decided that it's necessary for you to take somebody's life, even if it's a clean shooting, there's going to be consequences, bro. Right. There's going to be some feedback. I did an article on my website called The Aftermath of a Shooting, and there's going to be consequences. You can believe that. But then there's a whole thing too saying, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. So, right. You got to weigh it out. But no, a firearm is definitely, a tool that we use in the industry. But the point is, it's only a tool. To me, I think a much better tool is your mouth. And if you've learned how to communicate, there's a book by a guy named Jack Thompson called Verbal Judo. It's because everybody will ask me, what's the best executive protection book out there? And I say, well, here's one that I think that's really good, Verbal Judo. And they look at me because, they're expecting to be how to protect your client in 15 ways or something like that. Right. It really starts with how to communicate with people, how to get yourself out of challenging situations. And I've had to do that over the years a lot. And I've taken myself out of harm's way. And I've taken my client out of harm's way. I often, is one of the things I tell my kids, or I used to tell them, it's like, be careful, because what you say or what comes out of your mouth might take something to a whole new level. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, Michael, guess what? It's okay to walk away. It's okay to just, man, I'll share this quick story with you because I think it drives the point home. I was playing basketball when I was with Prince, and I had a cousin that lived in Compton. And this will touch on situational awareness and being in tune in your environment and being very careful. And so we was playing basketball. I was pretty aggressive, and I elbowed this dude in the jaw. And he looked at me and said, "Yo, man, that's a foul, man. You better check yourself." I'm like, whatever. I'm young. I'm brash. I'm in good shape. I consider myself, I ain't no punk. What? Man, this dude had a couple of his boys, and they looked over. And the thing I found really interesting at that time, because I was ready to okay, let's do this. I ain't scared of your boys. But I remember this, Michael, was like 85 degrees. It was in the middle of summer, and all these cats had coats on. And this one dude gave me the most iciest look ever. And he said, "Yeah, what's up, dog? What's up?" And I was like, "Nah, man, my bad. I'm cool."
Yeah, same Minneapolis.
I'm really cool. But See how I controlled my words, and these are the things that you learn in verbal judo. My words could have took things to a whole nother level, and you may not have been interviewing me today, but it was what I said next. I said, nah, man, no problems.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, we always say back in, you got to have a strong mouthpiece. That was a lot of how we survived out here, because not everybody was built to be throwing hands, certainly not throwing bullets, but we could talk and communicate with each other. And like you said, understand, don't mess with that cat. Yeah, go ahead and take the L on that. I'm cool. You got it, Playboy. And go home to your moms and them. So now I definitely hear what you're saying on that. Another part I'm wondering about your industry, how do you deal with, like, if you're, the principal, as you said, the client, what if they start to exhibit, I don't know if it's self-destructive, or maybe they're kind of moving in a way like, I'm here to protect you from sort of these external situations and be prepared. But is there anything in that where you have to maybe maybe there's something going on with your client that may be destructive, and how do you deal with that, or do you? I'm just curious.
Man, it's really funny. It sounds like you've been listening to my Clubhouse chats. That was one of the questions that somebody asked me last week, and it was it was basically dealing with a difficult client was the theme. And all you can do is educate people and get them to see how. I mean, Michael, we're there for a couple of things, and maybe this will answer your question. Number one, I'm there to protect my client from outside challenges, but also maybe from some inside challenges as well. I got to protect my client from themselves and also protect me as well too. And so we started getting the thing last week in my Clubhouse chat is, what if your client's doing something that not only could be detrimental to themselves, but to you, and they're just unwilling to change. And so, what I told the group is sometimes you have to be willing just to walk away. And sometimes that's hard for people to imagine doing that. In essence, at the end, I walked away from Prince. Now, not because Prince was doing something that I had issues with, but it was just time. And you have to be okay with doing that. I mean, there's other things in life that, hopefully for most people, than a job. I figure I can always find work somewhere else.
Now, you had been with them 9 years, and I assume is that pretty much a 24-hour day-to-day type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I had help, and there was a group of us. And, Prince wasn't somebody that had to have you. I mean, it was like, you talked about the Miko thing, about him and Miko getting into the confrontation. And I didn't know about it until we were at the club. And he sent me and Gilbert over to go talk to Miko and saying that he wanted to talk to him. And so, at Paisley, if we were there, we were doing something else. So it wasn't like, we were him 24/7. The thing that, we were around the most was when he went to a nightclub, and he frequented them quite a bit. And when we were on tour. And then we had a security team at his house as well, too.
Okay. I don't know if you want to speak on it or not. Was there something where you decided, it's time for me to move on to other things?
Yeah, and I'll share that. I'm okay with sharing it. Okay. I had a newborn. And
that'll do it.
one of the things that I see quite often, excuse me, I need to get some water. But one of the things that I seen quite often when I was on the road, you had these lifers, and they would share these horrible stories, Michael, about, oh man, I haven't seen my son in 9 months, and we're having all kinds of challenges. My wife said he's doing this and doing that, and to me, I'm like, well, yeah, no kidding, you're having problems because you're not there. And, for most fathers, we look at things from this perspective. It's like, I got to take care of my family. So I'm doing a good thing. But sometimes, we don't realize that all our children, all our significant others need is for us to be there. And so that wasn't happening with me, man. And the story that put it on, I was tired. It was a while, and I was just tired, man. I was tired of being away from my wife and my newborn. And, it wasn't fun for me anymore. Staying in hotel rooms. And to this day, man, we could be at a 5-star hotel. And I'm like, can we go stay at an Airbnb at a house or something? Because that's what I did for 9 years of my life. And so that was my issue. And I remember I was supposed to get some downtime with my family, and soon as we did. It seems like we had just got back from Rock in Rio, a show that he did down in South America.
Yeah.
And what Prince would do for the winters, he'd stay in L.A. And at this time, Gilbert, who was my partner in crime, he was the president of Paisley. And Dwayne Nelson was the one that was working with me. He was my number two. And we had came back, and I went out to Paisley to pick up my check. And he's like, hey, man, P wants to go to L.A. for the rest of the winter, and he doesn't want anyone else to be out there with him but you, not even me. And I don't know, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I said, well, wait a minute, man, we just got done with this tour, and I ain't had no time to see my son or my wife, and now you're telling me I got to get back on the plane. And it was a moment of clarity for me, Michael. I stood there, I don't know whose office I was in, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I said, as a matter of fact, I'm done. And Dwayne said, what do you mean you're done? I said, like, I'm done. He said, I don't think you heard me. He said he wants you. I said, I heard you. And it was like, man, a cloud being lifted. I was like, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. And I turned around and I walked away. And so Dwayne freaked out. And he went and got Gilbert Davison and Jill Willis. And I remember I'm walking out to the parking lot to go in my car. Gilbert came running out. He said, hey, man, what's going on? What do you mean you're done? And I said, I'm done, man. It's been a good ride, And he said, well, wait. Okay, you need some time out. We can make that happen. And I said, yeah, that would have been nice. But no, I want to be with my son. I want to be with my wife. I want to go to the next phase of my life. So that was it for me.
Man, I can respect that, man, because, the time you spend with family, you don't never get that back.
Right,
and
exactly.
Like you said, you've been out there 9 years. And I can imagine it can get taxing at times. I mean, you pretty much, is it fair to say you're on a beck and call? Like, yo, we got, we're not consulting with you. We're moving this way now. So let's go.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like I told you, I had been to Paris, but I hadn't been to Paris.
Right.
So here I am in all these wonderful places around the world. And only thing, Michael, I seen was, some room in a mansion, or a hotel room. And quite honestly, I was getting on Prince's nerves and he was getting on mine. I mean, when you were really close to him, I don't know, man. It was this weird thing where, I know we both were like, the stuff that I used to do to that man at the end, I'm like, I can't believe this dude ain't fired me. And I'll share, because it's funny, I'll share one story, is that I couldn't tell Prince how I felt. No, I'm not going to do this. But there were things that I would do to be rebellious to let him know that I was pissed, And so you remember Don King, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So I had my hair I had a relaxer in my hair. So what I started doing to get on his nerves is I started wearing my hair like Don King. So I just started having my hair spiked up, and he would just look at me, man, and he wouldn't say anything. But I'm like, okay, tell me I'm fired. I mean, I guess I wanted to be fired. And he just let it go. And I'm like, dang. So I had this maroon shark skin double-breasted suit, man. And Michael, I wore it every day. And man, I never forget, man, we were driving down Melrose Avenue in Los Angeles, and he told the driver, he said, pull over right here, right now. And we went to this clothing store, it's a men's clothing store called Fred Siegel's. And he gets out of the car, right? He opens up the door because it was unannounced. I don't know what he's doing. He gets out of the car. I'm like, oh, holy crap. So I get out of the car. I'm like, what's going on? He says, just come on. We're going in the store. I'm like, what? Prince don't shop at no Fred. He don't shop at a store. He has his stuff made. Man, we go in there. He looks at one of the sales clerks. He says, you come here. And the guy gets this look. Oh my God, it's Prince. Yes, sir. What can I do? He says, come follow us. And he just goes down this rack. He says, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Michael, this dude picked me out 12 suits. He says, get them measured, and I'm going in the car, and I'll wait for you. Wow. And so he bought me all these suits, man. That was his response because I kept wearing the same one. So he's like, we fixed this problem. So, man, but we were just doing that. I mean, I was mad, and so he got mad. And like I said, all I wanted him to do was like, Huck, it's a good run, because I felt that I couldn't quit at the time because I felt I was betraying him.
You felt like you was obligated or something? Or?
Huh?
Do you feel like you were obligated?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you'll find that that's a trait with most characteristics. Like you said, if you listen to that book with Michael Jackson, Remembering the Time. It's an awesome book. I recommend it to anybody, the senior artists, and listen, it's great. But Michael, they weren't even getting paid. And the question I was asking was like, why are you still doing this?
Right.
And it was because, I mean, Michael, think about this. If somebody's willing to put their life on the line for someone, what does that tell you about them?
Yeah, they're loyal.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah, I remember that part in the book when they wasn't getting their money. I was like, man. And they was kind of playing with the money too, some of the other little handlers and stuff.
Yeah.
That was nuts.
That's another one. You should have somebody on your podcast talking about the politics behind, these individuals, because that's a whole nother podcast.
I can imagine. Well, let me ask you this, and I want to respectful of your time too. And you just brought up something I think is interesting. Who do you answer to in that? Because I know, it sounded like there was Gilbert there, Dwayne, yourself, Prince. Do you just answer to Prince? And then like you said, you had to come to Paisley Park to get your check. Like, is there somebody else? Is there management? I don't know. Did you have management at this time?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a great question. And it's an interesting one because every case is different. So I had been with Prince for so long that I answered to Prince. Now, Gilbert at the time was my boss. Jill Willis technically was my boss, but I had a direct line to Prince. And so what happens with a lot of protectors in the industry, they have to deal with the personal assistant or management. They don't really get that relationship with the principal. Mm-hmm. And so mine's kind of a unique story. A real quick one, because like you said, I am getting close to time here. I probably got about another 15 minutes. But a real story is that we were let's see, was it Italy? Or maybe it was Switzerland. But anyway, Prince wanted to come back to Minneapolis. Long story short, I got a private airplane that cost a lot of money, and I remember the accountant snapping on me. Mm. She called me every name in the book because it was last minute, and he wanted to go home, and it was my job to make it happen. And she went off. And I told P, he's like, okay, I'll have a conversation with her. And I didn't hear anything else about it after that. But I was like, what was I supposed to do? This dude said he wanted this. He wanted to go home.
Right.
And so, but I had a direct line to him, and that's not always the case. I don't know how many other protectors over the years, because I think there's been 22 of us. And that was one of the things that I talk about on one of my podcasts. There's been 22 protectors that have worked with Prince and when I say protectors, because somebody got mad at me, well, I bodyguard Prince at Glam Slam in LA one time. I'm like, no, I'm talking about people that actually spent more than 2 hours in his presence, somebody that was assigned to him 24/7. Mm. And so that number's 22, and I was number 4. Wow. And so with that being said, I had a direct line to him, and that's not something that's always like that.
And I imagine you saw some regime changes, if we can say that, during your time.
Absolutely. There. I mean, when I started, Fargnoli, Cavallo, and Ruffalo were there, and then you had Steeple Phillips, and their management styles were totally different, and the individuals were totally different. So, yeah.
Well, and we're not going to go into it, but I don't know who I was talking to about this, but they talked about when, was his name Albert Magnolia or something? Mm-hmm. He came in sort of, was it like after Love Sexy or something, and then it was like a whole different group of people, or?
Yeah, and I was around when I was there. But Michael, here's the thing. I mean, we'd see these people come and go with all these ideals and stuff like that. But my relationship with P was so tight that it didn't really faze me because they couldn't get, the only person that could get rid of me was Prince. Even my boss, or Gilbert at the time, he couldn't do it. He'd have to talk to Prince because that would have an impact on Prince's life, if you know what I'm saying. So right. Where's Hucky at? Well, I let Hucky go. Why did you do that? Mm-hmm. Those are the questions that would happen.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's another podcast for another day, but that's a fascinating thing. Because like you said, I can imagine there's a lot of politics jockeying for position. Who got this person's ear? Are you friends with this person? Or they don't like that? So, but man, we'll save all that.
It really is. And it's fascinating because that's another side that a lot of people don't talk about.
Right.
And it's not just with P. It's just with anybody in the entertainment industry, man. Mm-hmm. It's vicious, man. And like I said, those are things that I talk about on my show. We talk about, know who signed your checks. Because at the end of the day, the one that signs your checks is the decision maker. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lastly, before we get out, because you mentioned it, and I want to make a cycle back to it. You made mention of some shots fired with Eddie Murphy and Hammer at the club. You got to finish that.
Yeah, there was a club called Tramps. I think it was Tramps. It was in the Beverly Center in L.A. And we was in the club. Eddie Murphy was in there. And Prince and Eddie were really good friends at the time. And this just goes back to what I was talking about, situational awareness. And I was beginning at this time to understand, what executive or close protection was all about. And so I didn't have any formal training at this time, but I had common sense. And so one of the things that I thought about, Michael, is if you're in a nightclub and there's 500 people in there and there's only one entrance, what happens if something goes wrong? And so I was a thinker, man, and I gave thought. It's like we should probably find another exit in the event that something goes wrong. And so that's what I tell my kids all the time. Don't go out. Don't think about going out the way that you came in, because that's what everybody else is going to do. And there was a big incident in Chicago years ago. I think it was a club called the O2 or something like that. But a bunch of people lost their lives because something went down in the club, and people got trampled because people were trying to get out the main door. And so if people would have just realized, it's like, wow, let me go out this other door here, then they would have increased their chances of survival. So anyway, we're in this club called Tramps in the Beverly Center, and Eddie was in there, and MC Hammer was in there, and somebody started firing shots in the club. And what happens? Everybody tried to go out the front door. We got Prince. We had two-way radios at the time. We got a hold of the limo driver, told him to meet us around back. We took Prince through the kitchen, got him out of the club safe and sound. This one superstar's guys walked them right in front of the shooter, and they couldn't get out, and it was disastrous. And so, and it goes back to, like I said, those are the things that I teach to my kids about, being aware of your environment.
Wow. All right. Listen, Hucky, man, I so appreciate and thank you for coming on here and sharing some of these stories and just these anecdotes and giving us some good game. And you gave us some great books to go look up as well, so we can go learn something. So I just want you to know, man, we really appreciate you coming on here, man. Two things. Mention the Clubhouse thing you got, but also we didn't even get into the PRN alumni. Remiss not to even just say the name, but I know you said you started that as a Facebook page, which I didn't know that. That's fascinating to me, because the way I think of it now is this sort of very big thing. But quickly, where can people find more about you or get in contact or learn some of these things you got going on?
Well, it just depends on what your interests are. If you want to or have any interest in learning more about protecting yourself or your family or something like that, I have a website called Bodyguard Careers. And it's really an information resource center to help anyone to get in the field of protection. But also, too, there's a lot of great articles on just being able to protect yourself. And so you can always go to the contact page on that. I'm on Clubhouse. And for those of you who don't know about Clubhouse, it's an audio platform that you can learn just about anything you want. And the really cool thing about Clubhouse is you can have interactions with some people that you may have followed on other social media sites and have some direct feedback for them. So my handle on Clubhouse is Close Protection. So you can find me there. And you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn underneath my name.
All right. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, you can definitely find us at podcastjuice.net. Of course, we're here on YouTube and all the popular podcast platforms out there. We thank you so much for listening. As I always say, work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Peace.